We have been promising the American people that we will repeal and replace this broken law because it's collapsing and it's failing families. And tomorrow we're proceeding.
Do you have the votes? Do you have the votes? Do you have the votes?
Dana bashes.
I recognize that.
I know that bash
voice.
hectoring.
That was House Speaker Paul Ryan, silent on answering that question. Of course, he's trying to win over more skeptical Republicans to support the GOP bill. So winners, losers, who are they based upon what happens today? Let's bring back
when you said loser.
Winners, losers. Let's bring back our panel. Jason Johnson, Ron Brownson, and A.B. Stoddard. A.B., I want to start with you because, you know, obviously the conventional wisdom is that President Trump would be the loser, but I don't quite understand that. The Republicans have been trying to figure this out for 8 years. He's been in office for 2 months. How is this on his head?
Right, and you see that he's already going to, blame the congressional Republicans, and particularly Speaker Paul Ryan, for putting together a bill that couldn't pass, putting it first in the sequencing of their legislative agenda. But the truth is, everyone really loses. I mean, the Republicans had 7 years, as you said. They've promised and promised. I do think if the bill goes down, it's sort of a win for the Freedom Caucus. They'll be very emboldened, and the Koch brothers promising tons of money to anyone who voted against it. I mean, those forces will obviously be strengthened, and the speaker will be weakened. But for Trump, even though he can try to keep it at a distance, he told everyone that the earth would open up and swallow us whole if Obamacare continued as the law of the land. And so he owns that rhetoric, which he used as recently as yesterday in the tweet that Jeff Zeleny read. It's a terrible disaster. It's the end of the world. It's melting down. And so I think ultimately what he also is not seeing in terms of this sort of short-sighted ultimatum is that success breeds success. Capitol Hill moves slowly. Big bills are hard. That's why Republicans said it was a mistake for Obama and the Democrats to do them, and they swore they never would. Now they're going to do them. And so if you look at a failure on health care, how do they get through the debt ceiling debate? How do they get through tax reform? Tax reform is going to be a room full of sacred cows, and there's going to be no bill. I can tell you that sounds cynical, but just wait till they get to tax reform. And so it really imperils Trump's agenda, no matter how much he tries to dump it on the Republican leadership.
At least with tax stuff, you have givebacks that you can have for people. You can cut individual deals. This is different. But so Ron Brownstein, let's do a little bit of a different spin on it. Let's assume it does pass in the House, okay? It's just too much pressure to go against. The Freedom Caucus, sure, they stood up as the Tea Party against Boehner, but this isn't just Ryan. This is the President of the United States. This is this big promise they have hanging over their head to do something. How would they justify not doing anything? But even if they win in the short term, what's the chance that it becomes a Pyrrhic victory? That when they get into the Senate, they have even bigger problems and they don't care about Trump?
I mean, this is the classic legislative Vietnam, where you're fighting just to kind of maintain, prove your credibility, rather than having a clear idea of what the ultimate goal is. Because the price of getting this bill out of the House, if they do survive by a vote or two, has been to revise it in a way that makes it extremely unlikely, virtually impossible, for it to pass the Senate in anything like its current form, which means they are in effect kicking the can down the road. If there is any way to get this out of the Senate, it is going to look very different, and then in a few weeks you're going to be back where we are today, which is, will the House accept, will the House conservatives in particular accept something that is much more expansive than they prefer? It is worth noting, Chris, 20 years ago when Bill Clinton was president, the Republicans twice block granted Medicaid, voted to block grant Medicaid without really much of a fuss, and the fact that they are having so much debate over that aspect of this now is a reflection of how much the party has changed and how many lower middle income, older white voters are part of that Republican coalition and taking away the benefit. I mean, the biggest problem they have in the Senate are the states that expanded Medicaid. Republican governors like in Arkansas, Ohio, and Nevada that are opposed to this change, and thus their senators may be opposed to this change. And that is something that could look very different and much more objectionable to House conservatives, even if they can keep this ball moving today.
Jason, despite all the hand-wringing, you think it will pass today?
I think it's going to pass, and we're just going to ping-pong it back and forth. The Senate's going to strip it. They're going to send it back to the House. The House is going to send send it back to them. We saw this happen in 2010 with the original health care bill. You had a group, I call them the Stupak group. It was Congressman Stupak, Northern Michigan. You had a bunch of pro-life Democrats who were like, I can't vote for this. I can't have Catholic hospitals in my district paying for abortion. So the president said, all right, I'll let you guys vote for a bill. Of course, it got stripped out in the Senate. They handed it back. He cut a deal. He got them on board. I think that's what President Trump is going to have to do with the House Freedom Caucus. But again, I don't see this passing the Senate. And if it ends up back in the House, I don't know that they have the political capital to get a full bill through this year.
So, fine point on it, A.B. Stoddard. If it passes, is it necessarily a win for Trump, or do they get it through despite him?
I think that Trump will take the win, Chris.
Well, he'll definitely
basically
take the
thinking
win.
All week
He has
in
unique
town
ability
has
to
been
spin a win out of things that most would see as a neutral to a negative. But would that be a fair reflection?
If they pass it, Trump wins. If they lose it, if there's a defeat, it's Ryan's loss, right? He's to blame. That's pretty much the way the White House is going to spin it, and they've actually telegraphed that. But I mean, I do think that they are desperate. As Ron said, it's no longer about what's in the bill. It's not about health care. It's literally about a W on the board. If they get this through tonight, they will be so relieved. They don't care that it's dead on arrival in the Senate. They've just punted for another day, and they really will be incredibly relieved because they just don't want a defeat.
I bring it up because of the tweet you pointed out from
John Weaver?
McCain's guy and Kasich's guy.
Yeah.
He said, do you really want to follow a guy who's at 37% popularity with the FBI on his tail?
Right. I mean, he was talking about whether or not, President Trump has the leverage.
And it's just worth noting, if you actually passed this and had to implement it, and 24 million people lost insurance and premiums rose 25% for people aged 50 to 64, and it became impossible to buy maternity coverage at any price or mental health and drug abuse coverage at any price, would you want to run under that set of facts in 2018 in pretty much any district that is competitive?
Panel, thank you very much. We'll see what happens in a few hours.